Hello, I'm Emma Desi and welcome to another episode of Turning Readers into Writers. If you're brand new here, welcome, and here's what you need to know. This is a community that believes you are never too old to write your first novel. No matter what you've been up to until now, if you're ready to write your book, I'm ready to help you reach the end. I focus on helping you find the time and confidence to begin your writing journey, as well as the craft and skills you need to finish the book. Each week I interview debut authors, editors and industry experts to keep you motivated, inspired and educated on all things writing, editing and publishing. If you want to catch up, head on over to emmadesi.com where you'll find a wealth of information and tools to help you get started. Before we dive in, this week's episode is brought to you by my free cheat sheet, 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write. In this guide, I give you 30 ways that you can find time to write in the small gaps that appear between the various errands and tasks and responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Now, you might be thinking that you don't have any time to spare, but I can guarantee these top tips will give you writing time you didn't think you had. If you thought writing always involved a pen and paper or a keyboard, think again. If you thought you needed at least an hour at a time to write your manuscript, I help you reframe that. You won't be disappointed. Get your free copy of 30 Top Tips to Find Time to Write by going to emmadesi.com/30 top tips. Okay, let's dive in to today's episode. Reyna Marden Gentin grew up in Great Neck, New York. She attended college and law school at Yale and for many years practiced as an appellate attorney with the Public Defender's Office before turning to full-time writing. Reyna has studied at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College and her work has been published widely online and in print. Her debut novel, Unreasonable Doubts, was named as a finalist for the Women's Fiction Writers Association Star Award in 2019. Her first middle grade novel, My Name is Layla, came out in January 2021 and School Library Journal noted that Layla's struggles at school and home are authentically depicted and readers who face their own challenges will relate. Layla won the 2021 gold medal in the Moonbeam Children's Awards in preteen fiction. Reyna's latest novel, Both Are True, was published in October 2021. Nicola Kraus, the co-author of The Nanny Diaries, called Both Are True a moving novel that examines what it means to start over with surprising consequences. And Reyna lives with her family in Scarsdale, New York. I had a lovely conversation with Reyna. I really valued what she had to say about the benefits of workshopping, and has actually given me pause to think about, well, gosh, maybe I should be doing a little bit more of that too. And I wonder if she'll have the same impact on you. I hope you enjoy the conversation and let's dive in. Well, Reyna, thank you so much for joining me today. It's lovely to have you here on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I wonder if you could just sort of give us a feel for, what your journey to writing was and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. So I had practiced law for a very long time, close to 25 years. And I kind of hit the wall at some point. And I guess we may talk about this a little bit more later, but when I left my job, I didn't really have any idea what I was going to do. And I started, looking around the way you do when you suddenly have time to do the things that you've never done before. And I tried a bunch of different things. I signed up for piano lessons. I tried yoga, all those kinds of things. And then a friend of mine told me she was taking a writing class at a local university and asked me if I wanted to come along. And at first I said no, because, my law practice was very heavily writing and I'd been writing for years and years. And she said, this is a memoir writing class. And I said, oh my God, I'm definitely not going to that because, that indicates you're going to write a memoir. And I knew I wasn't going to write that. I didn't have that kind of life experience that I would want to write a memoir about. But she said, come with me, you'll see, I bet it'll be different. And she was totally right. It was a fantastic class. And, it was really about learning to write the small moments in your life and, to write about your relationships and and to write in a way that other people could relate to what you were saying. Maybe they didn't have that exact experience with their mother, but they had a mother and it reminded them of something else. It resonated in some other way. So I got a tremendous amount out of it. And I took the class for a year, and, I published a few personal essays. And that kind of gave me the bug that maybe there were people out there that would be interested in reading what I had to say. So that's kind of where it started, and just kind of mushroomed from there.
And it is a bug. I think you're absolutely right. I think if we get that bug, it really gives us an itch that we just can't quite ever scratch, and it keeps going. And I don't know if you've had that experience yet, whereby you think, oh, I'm going to put this to the side for a while, but all too soon it comes back and you start scribbling away again or taking notes or
for sure.
ideas.
I mean, I've definitely had that feeling pretty much all through COVID. It's just been my house filled with the rest of my family that I hadn't been used to having here. And I ended up, really kind of stalling out for a little while, but now I feel like things are getting back to normal. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you just took a career change sort of slightly later on, kind of midlife, because it's a question I get asked a lot, which is, and this is from people who are in their 30s, say, and they say, gosh, I'm 32. Am I too old to write a book? Have I missed the boat here? But what was it like for you then, that feeling of, striking out on a completely new career, and one that's it's not like law, I always would imagine to be, there's a clear roadmap. With fiction writing and writing in general, there's not that clear guaranteed roadmap. So how did you feel navigating that change?
It was frightening. I think people tend to invest themselves in their careers in a way that it often becomes their identity. And for me, I was a criminal defense attorney. That's who I was. That's how I introduced myself to people. That's what you would talk about at a party. That's basically what I was doing and who I was. And, leaving that was frightening. And trying the writing, it was just a very different way to spend your time day to day. First of all, like very, very solitary in a certain way. I mean, I made sure to get involved in classes and with other people so that it wouldn't be completely solitary. But, I went from having colleagues that you bounce ideas off of and you sit around with and you have a snack with, to sitting in front of my computer and trying to make this work. And, it was definitely frightening, but on the other hand, it was very exciting. I mean, I really felt kind of liberated. And, especially given the practice that I had, when I was doing criminal appeals, I was very aware all the time that I only knew a very small piece of the story of the people that I represented, because I was representing defendants convicted of all sorts of terrible crimes. And I would know a lot about the things that happened on the day of the crime, but I wouldn't know anything before, right? And nobody gets to that day and does something terrible without having a whole backstory, right? I mean, they had a family, they had teachers, they had experiences, they had whatever addictions, whatever they had, but they had things that got them to that point. And I didn't know any of that. And it wasn't my job to know any of that. But when you're writing fiction and you're telling the story, it is your job to know all of that. And it was really, as I say, kind of liberating at a certain level, because I felt like now I can make it up and I can come up with some of the answers that I couldn't find before. And, so in that way, the turn from one to another was, eye-opening.
Yeah, very. Gosh, yeah, I love the sort of the how you've described the stories around the cases that you took on, and you're absolutely right. Nobody arrives in a court case in a bubble.
Right.
There is that whole life experience, that whole vacuum, and all these different factors that led a person to where they are. And that is one of the fun things that we do get to delve into as the creators of our characters. Just thinking on a practical kind of level, when you made that switch from being in an office, this kind of structured day, to a day where you are totally in charge of your time and you have that level of freedom, I think I certainly know a few writers who find that shift actually quite difficult to navigate. And there's quite often a feeling of, I should be doing something else, or kind of feeling guilty, or feeling at a loss even about how to structure and form their day, because becoming a full-time writer, you are taking on a new job, it's a new profession, it's not time off. So did you find that easy, or did did you kind of just devise a new routine for yourself, or was there an adjustment period for you too?
Yeah, there's definitely an adjustment. I think at least for me, I try to remain flexible because there are different phases of it, right? Like there was a phase when I first started where I was taking a class every week, and I kind of made my week revolve around that class. I would have pages that were due, for someone to read, for the class to read and workshop. And that gave me a goal, and it gave a certain structure to the week because I needed to get that done. But, things change. I mean, as I say, in COVID, there really were no classes, or if there were classes, they were Zoom classes. And I didn't find that very satisfying. And then things in your personal life change. I mean, when I first started this in 2014, my children were still home. So there were plenty of other obligations that I needed to work around, like dinner didn't go away just because mommy was trying to be a writer now, so that held its own complications. And then on the flip side, now that my children are gone and are not in the house anymore, that also holds, its own complications. I mean, there's the stretch of the day can feel very long. And especially if you're in a place where the writing is not coming easily, the idea that you have 10 hours ahead of you, even though no one sits in front of the computer for 10 hours, I hope, but whatever it is, that's also daunting. So I think it is it's a difficult job that way. And also because of what you said is that other people don't consider it necessarily a job. Like they see that your book is coming out and they know that it must have taken a lot of work, but they don't really look at it as, well, that's your job. That's actually what you do. And, it is what we do. And that can be difficult.
Yeah. I was talking to another writer who, when he went full time and, made the announcement that he was giving up teaching, he was going to be a full-time writer, he'd get calls from his dad saying, "Oh, hi, I thought I'd phone for a chat." And my friend would be like, "Well, I'm working right now." He's like, "But you're at home. How can you be working? You're at home." It's like, "Yeah, but I work at home."
Right.
It's quite an adjustment.
But at least with COVID, everyone's working from home. So that actually has made it in some ways easier because people expect you to have, you have a Zoom appointment, or you have some, that they are not going to interrupt because they do understand that everyone is working remotely now, or they were for a long time. So.
And that it's changed now, even if a lot of places are going back, I think it's more flexible than it once was.
Right.
Yay. So I wonder if I could ask you about your writing process and how, because that takes time to evolve as well. And you've written a few books now, so I wondered if you've sort of found that you've got a particular way of writing your first draft, for example, and then also beyond that, the editing, the publishing, and of course the promotion of books as well.
Sure. So, the process has been, as you say, it's kind of trial and error, and it's differed with the different books that I've written. The first book, I had written quite a number of pieces in the memoir class, developing characters, and they were not characters. In the memoir class, they were real people, right? There was my mother, there was a rabbi with whom I was close, there was a friend of mine who had passed away with whom I was close. And when I looked at the body of work that I had written, I thought, wow, maybe I could actually turn this into fiction and get it out there as a novel. And that's what I did. And it was set, essentially in the office that I had worked in as a public defender. And it was, it was largely inspired by my work. So the process for that kind of went quickly. I wrote the first draft in something like 6 weeks. But it was a lousy first draft. And how do you know that when you start sending it out and you're just getting no response. And I was like, wow, this clearly needs some work. So after that, I took a novel writing workshop. I think I took it twice. So, I had a lot of feedback Even after that, I wasn't sure that it was ready, and I hired a developmental editor to give it a read, which I think is a great move. I mean, I know I myself, I was reluctant to do it. I thought, do I really need that? I know how to write. I don't, but I recognized that I didn't know how to write a novel. I had never done that before. And she was incredibly helpful. So, yeah, so I think that that's a step, the developmental editor, that people sometimes, obviously, if you can breeze past that and get your book published without spending the time and money on an editor, great. But, but if you don't have a lot of experience and you want that really professional set of eyes, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, no matter how good you are, you can always be better. And so if a person is interested in becoming a better writer, then having someone who knows what they're doing look over, I think, is a great idea. And I certainly hadn't expected this, but I found the editing process to be like a really big craft lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned so much just from an edit of one book that I could then take through and into the next book as well.
For sure. And I also think, I mean, I'm a big fan of workshopping, because I think that, you write and you think that you're getting something across in a certain way, and you often aren't. And it's not that you're doing anything wrong but it's just when you hear a whole bunch of people say like, oh, I thought you meant that, he was angry. And you were like, no, I didn't mean angry. I just meant frustrated. Well, there's a fine line between frustrated and angry. And if you don't mean angry, because that has a whole set of other connotations, but sometimes you can't see it when you're writing yourself, or at least I can't see it when I'm writing myself. So yeah, I did a lot of workshopping. In the middle grade book I wrote one for kids, and that was also as part of a class. And the process there, I had a great time. I had no idea what I was going to be working on when I started the class. But we had pages due each week, and I came up with an idea at the beginning of the class, and I basically submitted a chapter to the workshop every week. And by the end of the year, I had, pretty good draft. So, it was fun. They were learning along with me what the book was going to be about, and they would have comments that would shape what the next chapter would be. And, I don't know how often a person gets to do something like that, but it was a luxury, and it was really fun. And the class was very invested in it. By the end, everybody's like, let's get this book out. Okay.
Oh, lovely. That's so nice to have that support and community around you.
That's great. Really great.
And what about then your latest novel, Both Are True? Was that a similar, did you workshop that one as well, or was that a more kind of on your own process?
Yeah, no, I did. That actually has an interesting story. They offer a workshop at this university that is near my home that is what they call a boot camp. So they run it in the summer for a week, and you meet in the morning and talk writing topics and share. But then in the afternoon, you go home and you write, and you have to write 2,000 words a day. So it's 10,000 words in a week, which your writers out there will know is a lot. I mean, even if it's not edited and polished, just getting that many words down on the page is really quite amazing. So I did it in the summer of 2018. And then I put the book away because I was working on other things. And I came back in 2019 and I did it again. And then I had 20,000 words. And I thought, all right, 20,000 words. When you get to that point, you feel like, okay, I've made a good effort and a good start here. And so I wrote a draft in the next few months, and then I took the novel workshop again. So the same sorts of things. I hired a developmental editor. I hired somebody different than I had from the first book, just to change it up. And yeah, pretty much the same process. I would love to feel confident one day in just doing it myself, but I'm not sure that that's the way to go. I mean, you're putting a book out for people to read it, and you need people to read it along the way, because otherwise you just have no idea what's happening. So.
Yeah, I think that's such a valid point that you make. We have this image, don't we, of most of us, I think, do have this image of writers in the lonely garret, and it's all this is created by one person and one person's vision, and they have their genius and they can do it all by themselves. But the reality is very, very different. And going back however many years, writers have always kind of collaborated in one way or another. Previously, it would have been with an agent who takes a young writer on and nurtures them and guides
Right.
them. An editor would do the same. We don't have that luxury anymore within the publishing world. And so having workshop classes like you've got, and much like the film industry does, they work together. So you're
Mm-hmm.
bouncing ideas, getting better ideas, brainstorming, sort of solving problems within the plot by working with people that you then come up with a better story. And I would imagine that as a writer, you feel more confident too about the story you're putting out into the world as well.
You do. And even I'm working on something new now, and this has been very different experience for me, but it's a writing workshop, but it's not the ones that I've done with my novels before. You had to have what you thought was a complete manuscript. And so everybody read everyone's complete book, over the course of the semester and gave feedback. And in some ways that's very helpful, right? Because often when you do things in pieces, somebody reads something and they say, oh, but this doesn't make sense. And you're thinking in your head, it does make sense because later something else happens, right? But when they read the whole book at once, obviously they know the whole story. So I've always kind of focused on that, but for a number of reasons, I'm now in a new workshop, and we each workshop something like 1,000 words when we meet. We meet every 2 weeks. So that's like 3 or 4 pages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because it's been working that way, I've sort of been writing that way too, like writing in small increments and not getting too ahead of myself. And that's been interesting also, like just because now, however many pages, I think they've read maybe 40 pages, but I feel like those 40 pages have been really well read, right? Like they were really focused and they were really helpful, and they know that I'm not really sure where it's going. So that's okay. Like they give feedback that, again, as you said, like help shape. It's not just that it's a reactive thing. It's also, wow, like this relationship, where is that going? You need to think about this. And I said, oh, wow, you're right. I need to think. I hadn't really thought about that. So, I think there's all different ways to get feedback, but I do think feedback is incredibly important.
Yes, yeah. Even if it's, if people out there don't have a workshop near them, or they're not able to do that, even just bouncing ideas off friends, or just giving them a snippet of something just to see what the response is, and if you can see in their face, oh, that sounds interesting, or if
Right.
it's a complete blank, and they're not interested at all. So very different experiences there. So I wonder then, as time evolves, how you'll discover your own process. I kind of hope you stick with doing the workshopping, because it feels like such a much more enjoyable way of doing it, and keeps it light, keeps it fun.
It's also social, right? I mean, these are my friends now, and it's great to have friends in that world who are trying to do the same thing you're trying to do. It just makes things a lot less lonely.
100%, absolutely. And so you decided to go the independent route, and how did you find the sort of learning curve that goes along with publishing?
I found it difficult. I mean, it really is such a huge learning curve. And if you don't know the players and you don't really understand how it works, it can take a while to get there. Like I said, I sent out my first manuscript to gazillions of agents when it wasn't ready at all, right? So that's one thing, you want to try to avoid, not only because it's not going to work, but because that slew of rejection can really put a damper on your ability to keep going. So, I wouldn't say I'm trying to think if I chose independent or independent chose me. I mean, honestly, if I had been able to get an agent, I would have gone that route, even though there were things I didn't like about it. I didn't like kind of the loss of control, and I didn't like how long it was all going to take. It seemed like the process, once you get an agent and then trying to sell your book, it was just going to take years. And as a young person, maybe you feel like you have that time. And of course, I would certainly tell somebody to be patient if they're a young person and this is their career and this is what they're going to be doing. But that wasn't my situation, and I didn't want to wait years for things to happen. So I've done a number of different things. In my first novel, I actually went with a hybrid press, and I don't know if they have those everywhere, but here in the States, they're pretty popular. And what it means basically is that they do everything a regular publisher would do. They vet their authors, they, edit, they copy edit, they, most importantly, they distribute, they have a sales force, but you do make an investment. It's, you pay a certain amount of money for all of that to happen. And then, they turn it around and you get much higher royalties than you would with a regular publisher. So, you do make most or all of that money back. But, you have to get your head around the fact that you are making an investment and you are, for me, I kind of felt like if I were starting a small business and I were making that sort of investment, which was a fraction of what you would make, I think, in a small business, but nobody would look askance. Somehow in the publishing world, it's still like, oh, you're paying to be published. So I don't know. That's a personal thing that you either get your head around or you don't.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And it's one that's sort of been in my world quite a bit recently, is the idea of our mindset around money and how we view money as authors, and in particular kind of independent authors, and the feeling that you shouldn't have to spend any money in order to write a best-selling book or to become a great writer. And it would be wonderful if we didn't have to, but certainly in my own experience, I've discovered there's such a degree of learning that you do have to invest at some stage or other. If you want to be a better writer, you've got to invest in learning. Coming from a corporate world, do you think that you have approached the financial side of it slightly different than, say, if you'd come from what could I say, a less corporate job?
Yeah, I don't think it's that so much as, I wonder, I mean, for me, I was in a very fortunate position that my financial well-being was not based on my job or my writing, and it never was. I mean, as a public defender, I was not exactly bringing in a salary that would support anything. So, but my husband was. So I think that has given me the luxury of looking at this as not a money-making scenario. And for me, thus far, it certainly hasn't been. I think you do have to lay out money. The other two books that I did with small presses. So I didn't have to pay for the publishing at all, which was great. But, you still have to, you don't have to, but if you want your book to be out anywhere, you have to invest in publicity. Unless you are with a huge publisher who's going to do all that for you, that's not going to happen. It doesn't happen by, it takes work, and it takes somebody else who knows what they're doing to get your book out there. And, so all those things, and it would be great to say, you make it back in your royalties. Yes. If you hit it big, you will. But if you are having more modest goals of just wanting your book to be out there, wanting to interact with readers, wanting people obviously to read your book, of course, but I just don't think you can look at it. And I don't know. Listen, as I say, I'm in a little bit of a different position. And I know, like, people, like, I've been going to some schools with my middle grade book, which is great. And, but they offer an honorarium. I would rather them spend the money that they're going to give me on the honorarium, which is usually quite a small amount of money. I would rather them buy my book for the kids than pay me that, whatever it is, $100, $150. If they buy it directly from my publisher, they can get quite a number of books and hand them out to the kids. And maybe they will have actually read it before I arrive at school. Right. So for me, that's more important. But I understand for somebody who's actually trying to subsist on this, give them that honorarium. There's no question. So, I think it's, very personal to the position that people are in.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's just, yeah, thank you for answering the question. I know money can be quite a emotive subject, but I'm just kind of curious about it at the moment. Yeah. Um, so to move away from that, I did want to ask you about where you get the ideas for your story. Quite often, we often get ideas from our own lives and our own experiences. So, for example, your novel, My Name is Layla, your middle grade, that's about a young girl who's got dyslexia. Is that something that either that you have or you have experienced in some way?
No, I really haven't. And I don't have it. My children don't have it. And one of the things I point out to the kids when I go to the schools is that, there's all different ways to figure out what you want to write, right? And there's the classic write what you know, and I've certainly done that. I mean, both my adult books have a large amount of legal material in them. But there's also research, right? You can figure stuff out. And it's not just people writing historical fiction. That's obviously sort of where, when you think about research and fiction, you think, okay, that's where the research comes in. But for me, it can be any topic that you want to write about. And, and I think the beauty of it is you obviously need to research something enough so that you can present it in a credible way. And I would never want to, present something like dyslexia and have somebody who does struggle with that learning difference say, this is ridiculous, this isn't at all my experience. But on the other hand, you don't have to become an expert. You don't have to become, you don't have to become the world's leading author who writes about dyslexia. You have a character who has dyslexia and you want to make that believable. And I actually had, somebody asked me at some point, like in the book, I don't get into too much how her dyslexia is treated at the end of the book. I make it, it's a little more open-ended. And I said, well, because I'm not an expert. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on reading disorders and, neurological issues when I'm not. But yeah, so I think that's a fine line also between, you want to stick with what you know, and it's often good to write from your own experience, but it's also okay to, to branch out and learn something new.
Yeah. No, I was talking to somebody else about research as well, and how it's getting that balance between doing just enough, but without kind of feeling that you have got to know everything, and then show that you know everything
right
on the page as well. That can be something that people worry about. And I think too, I don't know how you feel about this, but when I kind of look around and what people are saying sort of on social media and things, there's a real fear about writing about that's not your own experience, and that can leave people feeling, I think, a bit scared to try and sort of write about a character who is out with their own knowledge and their own ken. Was that something you worried about, or did you feel, no, I know if I do the right research and I present it in the right way, it'll be all right?
I didn't worry about it when I was writing the book. I'll tell you a quick story. I did have an experience afterwards that troubled me, which is I got a review from a reviewer here. So it's called School Library Journal. They're sort of the major reviewer of scholastic type books, and they liked the book. They wrote nice things about the book, and then the last sentence of the review said, the characters are predominantly white. And I didn't know what to make of that. I mean, I had a lot of thoughts, and they were upsetting because, first of all, I didn't identify anybody by race or ethnicity in the book, nor were they really described in a way where you would think, though, this person is that. Now, the cover of the book showed a girl who I suppose could have been white. She also could have been Latina. She could have been any number of things. And I guess what really troubled me about that was that wasn't the point of the book. Like the difference in the book was a girl who had academic problems and who had, a challenge with her learning abilities. And that is a class of people that deserves to be featured in books, and children who struggle with that deserve to see themselves as characters in books.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always have to be, race or religion or whatever else may divide us, right? Yeah. And I just found that very troubling. And I totally hear what you're saying, because it does make you feel both like you need to include, somehow you need to include everybody, but that if you don't do it correctly, you're going to get censored in some other way. And I don't know, it was a very strange experience for me.
Yeah, especially as it was just a statement. There was nothing around it.
So, anything, right.
Yeah. The world we're living in. It's the world we're living in. Gosh. Well, listen, tell us about your latest novel, Both Are True. That's the most recent release. Is that right?
It is. That came out in October. It was a fun book to write. It's about a woman who's a family court judge, and she's new to the bench, and she's very controlling and uptight, and she feels like she can kind of fix all the dysfunction that comes before her just by kind of sheer force of will. But she's been that way in her personal life too. So she falls in love with a guy who's much more laid back and spontaneous, and kind of fancies himself, a sensitive guy, I would say. And it's all going well until he leaves her. And he actually leaves her pretty much at the end of the first chapter. So the book goes through, it's told in alternate points of view between Jackie and the man whose name is Lou, about them figuring out what's important to them. What does love mean? What does family mean? There's a lot of scenes in her chapters of different cases that she deals with in the family court, and how she comes to understand the people and the relationships and the dynamics. And his chapters are devoted to the fact that he lands on the steps of his ex-wife when he moves out, and what happens there. So it's about family. It's about second chances.
And is it a romance? Does it?
It's not exactly a romance. It depends how you define that. I think there's not really there's not explicit sex in it. So there's not that kind of romance. It's a relationship book.
Yeah. It sounds intriguing. Yeah. And especially when he ends up on the doorstep of his ex-wife. That's a twist. Yeah. And what are you working on right now?
I'm working on something new. It's more of a mother-daughter story. There's no law in it at the moment, which also feels good, right? Like I've now not been practicing law for 7 or 8 years, and it's time to move beyond that, I think, in my stories. So the mom in this book is an award-winning poet. She's in her 70s, and it's about her relationship with her daughter, who had been an aspiring writer until her mom kind of put the kibosh on it.
And that's kind of very much in progress right now.
And that's very much in progress. I'm about 80 pages in. So
okay, cool. So it sounds like you like writing across sort of a mix of different genres, sort of going from adult to middle grade and back to adult again.
Largely because of the classes I've been able to take, which sounds crazy, but I'm willing to try anything once. And I took actually a class on mystery. I thought I could try that, but then that didn't work. But yeah, I just like to be open to things. And I think variety, once you can write. So
yeah, and variety is the spice of life, as they say. So
yes.
Fantastic. Well, listen, where can people find out more about you and about your books?
I have a website. It's just reynamardergentin.com. And obviously the books are on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, wherever you are. You can find them. So.
Cool. Well, I'll be sure to link to your website and things in the show notes. Well, Reyna, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been lovely learning about your journey and your books.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found that helpful and inspirational. Now, don't forget to come on over to Facebook and join my group, Turning Readers into Writers. It is especially for you if you are a beginner writer who is looking to write their first novel. If you join the group, you will also find a free cheat sheet there called 3 Secret Hacks to Write with Consistency. So go to emmadesi.com/turning readers into writers, hit join. Can't wait to see you in there. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.